Hello, everyone. Excuse me. This is Ross Carper with Keller Williams Metro South coming to you again this week. We're going to talk about personal property in a home when you're purchasing a home. And I've got on the line with me also Andy Galliano with Galliano Mortgage. He's going to discuss some things with you in the second half of this presentation. But one of the things I want to talk about today, when you're purchasing a home, obviously there's a lot of personal property that comes with it. And what we always want to make sure is the buyer and the seller understand what is remaining with the property when it's sold and what is not remaining with the property. I also want to know the do's and don'ts of how do you approach that? How do you ask for things? So we're going to look at it from the buyer standpoint first. When you go to put an offer on a house, obviously we have addendums for everything. One of the addendums that we have is personal property. And in the personal property, there's a list of all kinds of items like kitchen appliances, microwave, curtains, hardware for the curtains, um, uh, some furniture, and there's just a list of things that you can ask for. Now, a lot of people get confused with what to ask for and what is assumed that will stay. These are things that we tell our clients we have to make sure that there's a direct and clear understanding with the buyer and the seller on what's going to remain because everybody has different opinions. Now, from a real estate standpoint on the buying side, the things that will stay with the house or should stay with the house are things that are attached. You might have a bookshelf in a den that could actually be removed, but it's attached to the wall. That more than likely will stay. You've got pictures. Pictures do not remain unless the seller says that they can stay, or a seller agrees to leave them, or the seller can agree to let them go, but they're going to charge for it. You can purchase it from the seller. So those are all things that we need to make sure we have a clear understanding so that there's not any hiccups at the closing. Now, some of the things they'll be like bathroom mirrors. Well, the bathroom mirrors are attached. They're hanging on the wall. They may not necessarily be attached, but if you take a bathroom mirror away from over the sink, it leaves you with nothing. Most sellers are not going to do that. Most of the time, they're not going to want to take that mirror because it goes with the decorations of the home. So we just need to make sure we've got a clear understanding of that. There may be other things that you see as a buyer. You're going around and you might see a piece of artwork that you think, oh man, that is just made for that wall. I want that to stay. Well, you don't assume it's going to stay. You have to ask for it and put that in writing. I'm a proponent that everything and anything should be in writing. You can ask for anything you want to ask for when you're purchasing a home. Seller one has to agree to it, or you come to some type of agreement or understanding if it is going to stay or if it's not going to stay. Then you have to come to the understanding that if it stays, do I pay for it or is the seller going to give it to me? So we always work through all of those without a problem. What we don't want to happen is for people, both buyers and sellers, to assume anything. Because 9 times out of 10, when you move out as a seller and the buyer moves in, that's the first thing they're going to look for. If it's a picture or if it's it could be a pedestal or something that you have in a dining room that just looks fantastic. And you're expecting it as a buyer to stay, the seller is saying, no, you didn't tell me you wanted that. So that's what we don't want to do. We want to make sure that you as a buyer get everything that you ask for or try to get everything you ask for. And as the seller, as the listing agent, we want to make sure that we all understand what you as a buyer are asking for, and try to put the two together to make sure we're all on the same page. Now, Andy may have a few different things, a few different suggestions based on the lending portion, but there are some things that a seller might not be allowed to leave. And I'll let him get into that a little bit later. But we as realtors and loan officers want to make sure that this transaction is as smooth as possible. Everybody is on the same page, and everybody understands what's involved. So that's very, very, very important, and that's why we have a separate addendum for that. So when you're purchasing a home, make sure you ask your realtor about that so that you can cover all the elements, all the things. A lot of times where we have the biggest confusion is a refrigerator. Now, most people think, wow, refrigerator's got to be included. It does not. Seller can take it if you don't ask for it. So that's why I'm saying we have to make sure everybody's on the same page so that we don't get to the closing table, or even beyond that, you get there, move in, and you don't have a refrigerator in your house. That's not the way you want to start out in purchase of a home. So if I can help you with anything like that, just give me a call. I'm at 205-601-0123. I'll be more than happy to go into detail with you about your particular situation or item and make sure that you get the items that you feel that you should get with the purchase of a home. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy. Maybe he can shed a little bit of light on some things from his side of the fence and see if that helps as well.
Yeah, Ross, thank you again for having me on. And I have a question for you before I jump into my part, because it seems like almost every single house I go into these days, friends, family, going to look at a house that's for sale, to preview, that kind of thing, most of them have the brackets that attach a TV to a wall. So that bracket's attached to the home, TV's attached to the bracket. What would you do in that case? Would you say the bracket stays and the TV goes? What are your general thoughts on that? Or is it just good to be clear and spell everything out with the seller to start with?
I would spell everything out, and if I'm working for the buyer, I would make sure that they include total TVs and brackets.
Okay.
Because the bracket, most of the time when someone puts a TV on the wall, they're going to buy the bracket that's going to fit that particular TV. If you happen to, as a buyer, buy a bigger TV, that bracket may not be sufficient.
Right.
But then you've got to turn around and purchase a new one. So I would think if a buyer says, I love that TV the way it is, I'd really like to see if they would keep it. I'm not going to say there's a great chance, but there's a good chance that seller might say, you know what, I'm fine with that, because I'm going to get a new one anyway. I'm going to get a bigger one anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
So I would spell it out and just say TV and brackets indent to remain, and see how the seller feels about that.
Yeah.
Now, the seller may say, you know what, man, I just bought that TV, and that's the biggest TV I've ever had. I'm taking that TV with me. Well, if that's the case, I would probably ask them to remove the bracket, only because the one you buy is going to be a different size.
Right.
And I think it's better just to reinstall it new together so that you have the right size for the right size TV. Sometimes they can interchange, but most of the time, if somebody's going to get a new TV for a den, good chance they're going to get something bigger than what's up there.
Yeah.
So that's the way I would have it. I would just say flat screen TV and den to remain, along with hardware and brackets.
Gotcha.
Because if you think about it, you got a sound bar that might be going with it. You've got, other accessories that go with that TV. And I would want to make sure, if I'm the buyer, I would want to make sure that I got those as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. And, I think it just goes to drive the point home that it's good to be as specific as you can be in that sales contract, and that's where having a good realtor really pays off. So you don't get to the either the closing or after the closing, after the seller's moved out, and you as a buyer walk in and go, well, where's the light fixture in the dining room? You know,
Right. You can't ever be too clear. And I tell you how dining room fixtures get tricky. If it's an older home and it's got an old fixture in there, I mean, you might be thinking as a buyer that fixture is coming with the house. But if that house is old and this is a home that the seller is selling that he grew up in, there's a good chance he might want to take that with him because my grandmother gave it to me, or some relative gave it to me that's passed on, and it's got some sentimental value or whatever. Always make sure everybody's clear. You can never get too clear on a contract.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. And it helps on the mortgage side as well, because when we see a personal property addendum come through, you know, we're looking at that, because if there's any personal property that would add value to the home, or any personal property that would be an incentive for the buyer to buy this home instead of this home that doesn't have that incentive, then an underwriter is going to look at that and say, that's not allowed. And so personal property addendums sometimes can give us a fit in underwriting.
Sure.
But just about every, I can speak for Birmingham. I'm going to assume the rest of the country is going to be pretty much the same way, but I'm just going to speak about the Birmingham area right now. And that is pretty much every sales contract that comes in that has a personal property addendum attached to it. It states in that personal property addendum that any personal items that remain add zero value to the home.
Right.
And that's extremely important verbiage that's in there, because if a Corvette that's in the garage comes with the home, that's going to add some value to the home. And that is not real property. It's not affixed to the property. It is personal property, because it can get out and be moved on its own.
Right.
And so an underwriter is going to look at that and say, well, that's not really personal property. That's an incentive for the buyer to buy this home instead of the one next door to it that doesn't have the Corvette that's in the garage.
Right. Right.
So we can sometimes be dealt fits with underwriting when we're dealing with these personal property addendums. I would say this: if a personal item is listed on the contract and it states that there is no, that item adds no value to the real estate, then generally it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But golf carts, cars, boats, things like that are unusual for the area will not be allowed. Now, let's talk about this very quickly, because, you know, we're not that far from a lot of very nice lakes in Birmingham. Or in Birmingham, we're not very far away from a lot of very nice lakes. I'll say it that way. And not terribly far away from the coast either. And so sometimes there will be a boat that goes with the property.
Right.
And if that's the case, I say this: if the property by itself, the real estate by itself, supports the sales price that is being paid for that property, then all that needs to happen is that sales contract needs to be for the real estate only. There needs to be a separate sales contract for that boat,
Absolutely,
that cart, that car, whatever it is, and maybe it's for $1. The buyer agrees to buy the car or the boat for $1 from the seller, but it needs to be a separate contract, a separate transaction to keep everything legal and above board. And then we just rock on along and close on the real estate part of the transaction, and we're done.
Well, I think you're right. The thing is, you know, those are big ticket items.
Mm-hmm.
A boat and a car and a Sea-Doo might add $60,000-$70,000.
Yeah.
I always tell people, if you want to buy the boat's not included with the house. You buy the house, you do a separate bill of sale for the boat. They're totally separate. It doesn't need to get involved in the house. And you purchase it that way. That way, you've got two totally separate transactions that are not related to each other. Because I have seen cases, you add a boat to the price of a house, it could knock it out of appraisal. So then you got another issue. So, and think about this too, when you're on the beach and you're going to buy a condo on the beach, most condos now, and homes for that matter, in Florida, I don't know if that's just an understood fact or not, but most of the time it's furnished.
Mm-hmm.
They'll include furniture as well. And that's, if you're looking at a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, you might be looking at $40,000, $50,000 worth of furniture.
Yeah.
That can't be included in the price because it's going to knock it out of appraisal. So I would much rather see things separately just to keep the confusion down. Let the property be the property, the furniture be the furniture.
Yeah.
They're separate and that way they don't get intermixed with each other.
Yeah. Yep. I agree with you. So let me ask you this before we wrap up. What is the strangest thing to you? It may not have been that strange to the buyer or the seller, but what's the strangest thing that you've had or seen a buyer ask for from the seller as far as personal property?
There's been several things I've seen. There's one house I showed, the guy had a Maserati in the garage. Well, we were all kidding, just as people do. It's like, oh man, it'd be great if this comes with the house. Maserati is one of those unusual cars that you don't see many of.
Yeah.
And then another case I had was a boat. And, naturally as a buyer, he's like, oh man, if they include the boat, we got a deal. Well, it's not going to be included.
Yeah.
If you want to purchase it, it will be. So you kind of have to guide the buyer, because as humans, anytime we want to purchase something, if it's something that we really want, we want it all inclusive. And there has to be limitations on that, because I just don't think it's a good idea to mix the two. But
Yeah.
I would say a car, I'd say a boat. Unusual. I mean, I've seen them ask for pets. I mean, there's all kinds of things people ask for, but excuse me, you just have to figure out what's viable, figure out what the seller's willing to part with.
Yeah.
I got a house right now that there's a lot of furniture that the seller, we just got a contract on it, a lot of furniture that the seller's not going to take with him.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to leave it in the house. He wants to know if they want it. Well, that would be a separate transaction. They can purchase it for whatever, do a bill of sale, do a full description, bedroom suite, nightstand, mattresses, blah, 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 and for X amount of dollars, and let them settle that on their own.
Right.
So there's all kinds of things people ask for, and there's some things that people ask for that the seller's like, no way. My grandmother gave me that, and I am not selling it. Everybody's asked for it. Everybody wants it, and I'm not getting rid of it.
Yeah.
So we just have to work it out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the strangest thing I've seen that a buyer asked for in a sales contract was a cow.
A cow?
A cow.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
He's either looking for beef.
Now, I don't believe
I've never seen that.
I don't believe it was a cow that they ended up turning into beef. I think it was just a friendly cow that was in kind of the backyard, side yard that had been fenced off. And
wow,
the owners had a cow, and they were moving to a place where they couldn't take the cow.
Oh my
and so the buyers just flat out asked them in the contract if they could have the cow. And then the seller said, hey, it works great for us. So they accepted, and that was it. But I've seen pets be asked for before. Typically, if it's an older pet that may not make the move well, that's very accustomed and very used to that property. Or I've also seen it where the seller's passed away and there's the cat that's
Right.
there, and
Right.
the heirs of the estate don't want, none of
Right.
them want the cat and don't want to have to deal with
Right.
giving the cat away.
You got an aquarium there that's
Yeah.
years. I mean, there's anything and everything people will ask. We just
Yeah.
have to, as realtors, we have to work it out in a way that's agreeable to both parties.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool.
Good
I
deal.
think this is a good topic. I appreciate you discussing this with us.
Absolutely. And look, man, anytime, appreciate you. And folks, again, if you want any questions answered from me, I'm at 205-601-0123. I'll let Andy give you his numbers, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, I can be reached at 205-979-4412. I'm at extension 1 and be glad to help out in any way that I can.
Perfect. All right, Andy. Well, thank you so much for your time. Until next time, we'll get together soon.
Sounds great. Thank you, Ross. Have a great week.
Take care.
All
You
right.
too.
Bye.